This is another follow-up from after the Norway chess tournament. You might recall the Carlsen-Firuzja game, which went like this: e4, c5, knight f3, e6, and then bishop d3 from Carlsen. Unusual, but Firuzja well, entered into the spirit of the event and played g5. Really interesting move, and well, it was a crazy game. But also, you might recall the game Tari against Abdusatorov, which went like this. This was one from one of the earlier rounds. And yes, you know what's coming. Rook g8 from Abdusatorov. Again, with the idea of a g-pawn attack. Well, one of the viewers of the PowerPlayChess channel was inspired to try his own version of this g-pawn attack, and he sent it to me, and I'd like to show you the game. So thank you to David Franklin from Chicago. This was a 3-minute game played on chess.com. So, well, a blitz game. We're not expecting perfection. However, I really like the spirit with which this game was played and the style, the swagger. So let's have a look. So RCone against Chicago Dave, 1968, a Sicilian, and white goes for one of the anti-Sicilians, and bishop b5. So this is a tricky little number. I looked at this in my anti-Sicilians course, naturally, because it's quite popular at the moment. White's big idea is to take on c6 and then to switch systems and go for a Grand Prix attack. And having taken on c6, that is a very favourable Grand Prix attack position. However, if black plays knight d4, that puts a massive spanner in the works. And, well, the knight is actually very well placed on the outpost. So knight f3, it leaves the bishop just misplaced, actually. e6, that's a nice move. It's a little trick here, because if knight takes knight e2, queen g5 is rather a nice double attack. But white castles, this is one of the main lines. And white's bishop has to go back to a poor square. And now you can see the similarities between this game and the Carlsen-Firuzja game. This is all main line. This is, again, my recommendation in the anti-Sicilian course, my chessable anti-Sicilian course. And here, very interesting position. It's possible for white to go wrong here with a very plausible move. Rook e1 is a mistake. This didn't happen, by the way, in our blitz game. Rook e1 is a mistake because after g5, yep, that move again, g4 threatens to trap the knight. That rook has taken away the e1 square. And this is already very promising for black. Black gets a wonderful kingside attack. Great control over the central squares, for example, like this. And yeah, it's not just this diagonal, but white is going to be undone on the long diagonal as well. It's a great position. But instead of rook e1, here in this blitz game, white played bishop e2, which is certainly not a bad move because white wants to play d4 and just head back to an open Sicilian. Black can go knight d4 here, or you can head back into an open Sicilian with b5, and this is a very reasonable variation for black after queen c7 or bishop b7. I think black is fine there. However, Chicago Dave, after bishop e2, was inspired by all this g-pawn action and wanted to slice himself. g5, really interesting move. Now, obviously, that prevents d4 because black will just play g4 and then take the pawn here. So that rather stymies white. Now, I will return to this position at the end of the game and have a look at what white should play. All I can say is white should definitely not play h3. So white presumably wanted to go d4 and wanted to do a stop g4, but h3 is a dreadful move. He was caught with h5. Now that's a beautiful hook that black can exploit by going g4, and then the lines are going to open. And white is already in desperate trouble. Yep, it happens that quickly. White played knight h2, threatening this, but of course it's very natural just to give up the pawn. And look at that open h-file. Wow, this is happening very quickly. It's very crude, but very effective. Bishop h3, only move really to stop the attack. And presumably white thought that with the bishop here, that was safe enough. But oh no. Knight d4. So that knight gets in on the action as well. Knight f3. I'm not going to analyze this one too deeply. It's a blitz game, folks. I think it's clear that black has excellent compensation for the pawn. I think it's just such an amusing position with the queen and rook already in play on the h-file. And black's king completely safe in the middle of the board. White exchanged here and played knight e2. I think understandably wants to swing the knight back to the king's side to defend. d5. Yeah, and that's a difficult one. If that's taken, then e5, and you can see this is opened up. If e5, probably the best, then queen g7. So that threatens rook takes bishop. And after knight g3, queen takes e5. That's actually a pretty safe pawn to take. And then black will get some pieces out, and I think has a very promising position, actually. Just got to be careful not to get your queen trapped. But white played d3, and that is a disaster, because after e5, yep, that bishop made it into the game. I just find it really amusing that black is able to attack with all the pieces, apart from the queen, on the back rank. But it works absolutely beautifully. White is completely lost. f3, an exchange on h3. Queen takes. That king is not long for this world. King f2. No, it can't have it running away. Queen h4. Good move. So this is just going to win the knight. And much more. And the rook slides in on the action. And here, white resigned. A move before checkmate. Let's go to the end. Why not? Well, take a bow, Chicago Dave. Very nicely played. Absolute crush. I think it's very interesting to see how ideas from the top level spread out and influence the rest of the chess world. And that's a very direct application of the g-pawn attack. Let's return to earlier in the game. I think g5 is a really interesting move. And actually, looking at the database, it's actually been played a few times before, even at pretty high level. So, for example, we've had the Croatian player, Ivan Šarić, has played this with black. So h3 is clearly a horrible move after h5. But instead of h3, well, d3 has got to be the best move, just preparing to bring this bishop into the game. But I think, g5 has already done its job, actually, because it's prevented white from playing d4. And black has very good control over d4, actually. So the g-pawn is threatened. g4 has been played in a few games. Knight e1 has been played as well as knight d2. Knight e1 doesn't feel like a good square for the knight. You can see it just doesn't have anywhere to go now. And I think already this g-pawn advance has been justified. Remember that black, well, apart from developing the bishop on this long diagonal, black could also look to play queen c7 and bishop d6 to get some pressure here. And don't forget either b6 or b5 and bishop b7 And, well, if life gets too hot in the middle, the king can escape to that side of the board. But knight d2 is a better move. The knight has more prospects here. h5, which you can see it's rather nice. The pawn restricts white's pieces, takes away the f3 square. Knight c4, probably not a good move. That was played in one game, but then d5 I think is fine for black. Knight b3 is a better move. And bishop d6 was played in one game. I quite like queen c7 here, just keeps options open. And if bishop e3, then bishop d6, threatening here. And if g3, then h4. And you know, the g-pawn can be sacrificed. You know, I think to have the king on the long diagonal when the bishop's there and these pieces lined up, I think black has excellent compensation. Very soon, castle's queenside, the knight will move, the rook will come to g8. Tremendous compensation for black. I think it's really interesting. Of course, white doesn't have to play in that way, but just a little illustration of the options open to black in this variation. So, yeah, thank you again to David Franklin for sending that game. If any of you think you've played a really nice game, do send it to me. You know, I'd be interested to see if you've played a g-pawn attack, you've played a nice anti-Sicilian, or maybe a Kalashnikov, or just a game you're proud of. You can always send it to me through my website, www.danielking.biz, and there's a contact details there anyway. And don't forget, my Anti-Sicilians course from Chessable is available, and you can get lots of details on all these systems for black. Thanks for watching.